So Dylan Patel writes, the DeepSeek narrative takes the world by storm. For the last week, DeepSeek has been the only topic that anyone in the world wants to talk about. Basically true. DeepSeek's daily traffic is now much higher than Claude, Perplexity, and even Google's Gemini, which is crazy. But it makes sense.
But is that the Chinese market?
No. I think in America, because the traffic stats are always aggregated by American like tracking pixels.
Okay.
But Gemini is super embarrassing because it's a Google product. They should be stuffing it everywhere, but it's so hard to get to, as we talked about before. But close watchers of the space, this is not exactly new news. We have been talking about DeepSeek for months. The company is not new, but the obsessive hype is. Semi-Analysis has long maintained that DeepSeek is extremely talented, and the broader public in the United States has not cared. When the world finally paid attention, it did so in an obsessive hype cycle that doesn't reflect reality. Classic Americans. We get pumped.
Love it.
We go to the moon.
We get fired
and then
up.
we crash. And sometimes
and we forget how to go to the moon for a few decades.
Yeah, sometimes you're the world's
richest
richest
man.
man. Yeah, we run it back.
Mazda style.
Yeah, sometimes you're the world's richest man, and then you lose 99% of your money. That happens.
We'll get to that later.
Very American. We want to highlight the narrative has flipped the last month. When scaling laws were broken, we dispelled this myth. Now algorithmic improvement is too fast, and this too is somehow bad for NVIDIA and GPUs. The narrative now is that DeepSeek is so efficient that we don't need more compute. Jevons paradox is closer to reality. The models have already induced demand with tangible effects to H100 and H200 pricing. So you can just go look at the spot market for renting these GPUs, and you can see Jevons paradox in action today. And so it's a really strong market signal.
Yeah, and Ramp saw this with
oh yeah, that's right.
Their data, right? As the cost per token drop, the actual demand for them increased, spending on them increased substantially. So.
And so High Flyer is the name to know. They're a Chinese hedge fund, and they started using AI in trading, and they invested in 10,000 A100 GPUs in 2021. This is before the chip ban. They didn't do anything. Everything was above board, but they got a big cluster. It was
I wonder how many
massive
trips
investment.
to Singapore they've taken
Since then?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is that they might not have needed to, because they just built up such a huge cluster. But it goes on to say they spent over $500 million on GPUs, with estimates pointing to 50,000 Hopper GPUs across variations. So there's the H20, the H800, which is the nerfed one with that memory bandwidth, which they got around, by the way, and then the H100, which they can still get through the Singapore loophole and a bunch of other places. You can buy, I think, 1,000 or 2,000 at a time. And so there is an interesting angle here, which is that they truly do have goated engineers on the team.
Yeah.
Omega cracked, I think, was the term Dylan Patel used. They have a really crazy talent strategy. They aggressively recruit top Chinese university students, offering salaries over $1.3 million. And I assume that's per year.
Month?
Oh, per month? Yeah, I think it's per year. But in America, some people are making that per month.
Yep.
Got to get your money up. With flexible roles and unfettered GPU access, staff count is 150 and rapidly growing. And so they have, there's an interesting kind of like counter narrative to the whole like 996, grind it out, work really hard. They are much more like a research lab where it's just kind of people hanging out, trying stuff. There's really like, open-minded, try whatever you want. Don't worry about cost. Just run it, and it's produced remarkable results. It's more of an
and there
American
had been some
style.
pushback because from folks on the DEI side, just because there was no non-Chinese employees.
I think
they seem to have made that work.
Yeah. It's we'll see what happens. Maybe there'll be some pushback.
I expect the New York Times to come after them pretty hard. But
yeah, I would imagine Taylor Lorenz is writing something right now.
Yeah.
So in terms of server capex, it's estimated at $1.6 billion plus almost $1 billion in operational costs. There's some estimates here: 10,000 H800s, 10,000 H100s, with large orders of H20s in progress. H800 has the same compute as the H100, but less network bandwidth. The misleading 6 million figure was widely circulated as the cost of V3, but that doesn't include R&D, hardware depreciation, repeated experiments. Actual total spend is far higher, but at the same time,
just to break it down, R&D is the cost that they're spending on their team, which is undoubtedly one of in the like I would imagine in the billions of dollars a year. Based around.
They had $944 million in operational costs. So that's that. The OpEx is probably mostly R&D and salaries. They have 150 people making $1 million a year. Yeah. And so right there, that's $150 million
that we know of. They also
Yeah.
have been aggressively lying, and now the truth is coming out a little bit, but
Yep.
we still don't know the full truth.
Yep.
Right?
I think this is probably correct. I'm inclined.
This feels correct
Yeah.
and believable.
Yeah, and so it's easy to lean into this and be like, Dylan Patel is saying it's not 5 million or 6 million. It's actually closer to 500 million or $1 billion. And it's easy to be like, no, it's even higher. It's 50 billion. And it's like probably not that high, but it is interesting. And so in terms of model performance, DeepSeek V3 is the base model, while R1 is the reasoning model. We've been through this. And they have a couple genuine innovations here. So these are the things that you need to see. These are the buzzwords that are going to be going out in the AI, influencer space.
Yeah. So this weekend, start sprinkling them into conversations at home.
Yep.
They probably won't land, but you'll sound smart. And then come Monday, you'll be able to just sprinkle them in the workplace and really start, working them into the
you got to let
dialogue.
people know that you use these words so frequently. You got to use the abbreviation. So multi-token prediction, MTP. Call it
MOE.
Tokes.
Yeah.
Multi-tokes prediction.
Multi-tokes. Mixture of experts. Just call these PERTs. Specialized sub-networks. Quote-unquote experts managed by advanced gating networks. So you could say, oh, yeah, my PERTs are gated.
My PERTs are gated. I mean, the funny thing is that...
And real ones will know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
And so it's a good way to filter out who's LARPing and who's really, at the forefront of these broader trends.
Yeah. I mean, like the mixture of experts was described in detail by George Hotz when GPT-4 dropped. And he was saying that there were some hardware limitations to how large you could scale the models. And so they were effectively training 6 or 20 sub models and then wiring them all together with this mixture of experts thing. And so I've heard that term before, like outside of this. So that's not entirely
new. We don't need to give them too much credit.
But it does seem like combining all of these are what allowed them to create a great model. And then multi-head latent attention, MLA. You're going to be hearing a lot about that. Drastically reduces KV cache memory, 93.3% less, slashing inference costs. And that's obviously very important. And so at this point, V3 is reportedly passes GPT-4o from May 2024, although AI evolves fast and many new models have also improved drastically since. And there's this reasoning shift going on where post-training synthetic data like RL is getting cheaper than giant pre-training runs, letting R1 quickly match others like O1. Open weights advantage, DeepSeek is now considered the single best open weights lab, beating out Meta's Llama and Mistral. Although Zuck had a few things to say about that. He claims that Llama 4 is going to blow him out of the water and that he's still investing in CapEx.
And Zuck loves to deliver.
Yep.
He's done it many, many times. So that feels believable as well.
And so
he kind of has to too, to save face.
Yeah.
He's got to drop something like truly competitive.
Yeah.
Not just, oh great, you have distribution and you'll get users for it, but it's not best in class. With the amount that he's spending, which is something like 60 billion a year, he's got to show results, as well as the Meta executives that are all sitting there making 5 million plus a year. And facing that pressure internally to perform.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go back in the timeline when Meta dropped the first Llama model, because I remember the exact same hype cycle happening where people were really rooting against Sam for a variety of reasons, and people were rooting for Zuck for a variety of reasons because he was like on this Giga Chad arc, and there was this whole narrative of like, oh, Zuck, it would be a shame if I destroyed your entire company. Like OpenAI is going to zero now because Llama's out there and it's free and you can just inference it. And then I remember there was a Rune tweet at the time saying, like, have you talked to that thing? Like, it's not that good. Like, he was kind of playing like defense. Obviously it got better. And at this point it's pretty good, but it had the same narrative as like, oh, if there's an open source model, it's game over for the closed source models. And that didn't really play out because there was obviously the app layer and then all the
OpenAI
reasoning.
is clearly not just a model company. They're shipping products against the underlying model.
And they do seem to be able to stay 6 months ahead or so. So, V3 surpasses GPT-4o, but GPT-4o is almost a year old now, May 2024.
And it's crazy already, despite the mindshare dominance outside of Teapot.
Yep.
is insane with ChatGPT. So,
Totally.
like I talked to a founder yesterday, and she's like, "It's acting as a co-founder for me, and I'm like thinking out loud, talking to it all day long about what I'm building." And yeah, she could go and use, you know, Llama or any of these alternative products, and it's just for some reason it's not getting traction in that same way.
Yeah. And so let's break down the direct comparison between R1 and O1, DeepSeek's model versus ChatGPT. Again, I think a lot of the narrative of DeepSeek just killed OpenAI was driven by the fact that it was free.
Thing.
It was free. Yeah, exactly. And so a lot of people hadn't upgraded to the $200 model O1 Pro, and so they were just like, well, I'm not going to spend $200. That's too much.
It was the cost of the training run that everybody saw is really bearish because U.S. companies are spending,
and then there's the China dynamic,
billions of dollars. And then there was the concern around, you know, a lot of people just trading against the news, not really trading against Jevons paradox, right? No, and then there's the cost of like, okay, if you introduce a free product that's better than the free product of your competitor, what happens? But consumer behavior is not always entirely rational. And especially in the context, I just don't see. It's still hard for me to see DeepSeek, you know, becoming truly sticky and dominant, right?
Totally.
Because ChatGPT among consumers is a very loved product. And you can't underestimate consumer love because so many people have had magical experiences. If you go, hey, you can use DeepSeek and it's better, but they're like, well, I already love ChatGPT.
Exactly.
It does exactly what I want.
And it's learned a bit about me. Some of my data's in there already. Oh, and there's a little share button. So when I generate something with ChatGPT, I can share the link that onboards
and the value for us, it's like, okay, for $200 a month, we would happily, for the same service, pay $2,000 a month. So by telling us that we can get something that's comparable for free,
it's
the
not
value trade-off is like not that significant.
I only want the best, most cutting-edge model that has the most features at any given time. But a lot of people aren't in that boat. A lot of people do just want whatever's free. So is R1's performance up to par with O1? I want to read pretty much this whole paragraph here. On the other hand, R1 is able to achieve results comparable to O1, and O1 was only announced in September. How has DeepSeek been able to catch up so fast? The answer is that reasoning is a new paradigm with faster iteration speeds and lower hanging fruit, with meaningful gains for smaller amounts of compute than the previous paradigm. As outlined in our Scaling Laws report, the previous paradigm depended on pre-training, and that is becoming both more expensive and difficult to achieve robust gains with. The new paradigm focused on reasoning capabilities through synthetic generation and RL and post-training on an existing model allows for quicker gains with a lower price. The lower barrier to entry combined with easy optimization meant that DeepSeek was able to replicate O1 methods quicker than usual. As players figure out how to scale more in this new paradigm, we expect the time gap between matching capabilities to increase. Note that the R1 paper makes no mention of the compute used. This is not an accident. A significant amount of compute is needed to generate synthetic data for post-training R1, not to mention RL. R1 is a very good model. We are not disputing this, and catching up to the reasoning edge this quickly is objectively impressive. The fact that DeepSeek is Chinese and caught up with less resources makes it doubly impressive. But some of the benchmarks R1 mentions are also misleading. Comparing R1 to O1 is tricky because R1 specifically doesn't mention benchmarks that they are not leading in. And while R1 matches in reasoning performance, it is not a clear winner in every metric. And in many cases, it's worse than O1.
And this was your actual user experience where you were trying it and seeing, okay, this output is not on par with what I get from ChatGPT.
And my prompt was not something that's baked into some math eval or physics test. It was just, can you summarize this book in 5,000 words? Did you give me 5,000 words? And was it factually accurate or not? And O1 Pro gave me exactly 5,000 words, a little bit more. It was great. And DeepSeek gave me 1,000 words. And it's like, what? How am I?
Failed the test.
It failed my prompt for what
functional, I need. Functional test.
Exactly. And then add to this.
This is again from a consumer standpoint. You're not going to notice these small intricacies in terms of, you know, having the model, you know, run at 50 physics problems because you wouldn't have been able to get any of them yourself, right? So it's almost irrelevant. What matters is actually the output, which is what people want and what they're paying for. around specific problems that they need the model for.
Yeah. And this doesn't even include O3, the latest model from OpenAI that hasn't been fully released yet. O3 has significantly higher capabilities than both R1 or O1. In fact, OpenAI recently shared O3's results, and the benchmark scaling is vertical. Deep learning has hit a wall, but a different kind. And so then there's also the question of Google's.
Great line from Dylan.
Google's reasoning wall.
Looks like a wall, by the way.
Yeah, it's completely up and to the right. It's fantastic. But it's on ArcAGI, SWE-bench, and Frontier Math, Advanced Mathematics, like things that most consumers might not even care about the benchmarks on, but are potentially good proxies because a model that can do insanely advanced mathematics might be better at generating a recipe. And so Google jumped into the game to very little fanfare. They did not really break through.
Really struggling on the marketing front.
Totally. And so while there was a frenzy of hype for R1, a $2.5 trillion US company released a reasoning model a month before for cheaper. Google's Gemini Flash 2.0 Thinking. What a fantastic name, guys. I don't know why it didn't take off. You got 12 different words that no one knows what they mean.
It's possible that Clippy is like no longer able to be trademarked.
Yep.
So Google should just take Clippy for its next model.
Yeah. So the model is available. It's considerably cheaper than R1, even with much larger context length for the model through the API. And again, I'm signed up for Gemini Advanced Pro Plus plan. I pay for
Flash
it.
Thinking.
I have no idea if I have access to Flash Thinking 2.0, and I have no idea how I would even go and find it. If I Google it, I'm going to get the paper. I'm going to get some tweet. Like it's so hard to access Google's models. It's so embarrassing for them. Get it together, guys. On reported benchmarks, Flash 2.0 Thinking beats R1. I remember Peter Thiel had a fantastic distillation of what's going on in AI, where basically all the different AI labs you can think about them as like lemonade stands, and they're all obsessed with perfecting the formula for lemonade, and none of them are thinking about where to actually place the lemonade stand. And when you're running a lemonade stand, all that matters is that you're on the busiest corner. Location.
Yeah.
And that speaks to distribution.
Not even the corner. What neighborhood you're in.
Exactly. And so you can imagine that at Google they're like, Gemini Flash Thinking 2.0, we beat this benchmark. It's amazing. Everyone's gonna love it. And it's like that's not how products work, guys. Like that's just not no one is like, I'm gonna go figure it out at some point, but it's gonna take me 30 minutes to find this product and figure out that I'm using the right model.
You have access to OpenAI's reasoning model, so you can just use that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's easier to access.
Exactly.
Your data's already there.
Yeah.
Right?
And then now in every single Google product, there's some sort of pop-up saying like, hey, do you want to use Gemini for this? Do you want Gemini to work on summarize your emails? And I'm like, well, which Gemini? You guys have 17 different products. And like, how is it going to integrate?
I know. We're dealing with this email related bug right now for TB related to a new domain.
Okay.
And everything is set up properly, but it's not working. Yeah. And they just keep sending me the pop-ups of Gemini, and I'm like,
you can't get the basic like level 1.
Maybe I should actually try it with Gemini.
Hey, Gemini, fix this.
Can you fix this?
Fix this.
Yeah.
And so on reported benchmarks, Flash Thinking 2.0 beats R1, though benchmarks do not tell the whole story. Google only released 3 benchmarks, so it's still an incomplete picture. We think Google's model is robust, standing up to R1 in many ways, but receiving none of the hype. This could be because of Google's lackluster go-to-market strategy and poor user experience. But also R1 is a Chinese surprise, which is
nobody expected.
Huge advantage. To be clear, none of this distracts from DeepSeek's remarkable achievements. DeepSeek's structure as a fast-moving, well-funded, smart, and focused startup is why it's beating giants like Meta in releasing a reasoning model. And they did beat Meta. Like Llama 4 is still in training. They haven't released a reasoning model, and it certainly would be cool if this had just baked itself into.
At least Zuck is breathing a sigh of relief, knowing that they actually spent
the money,
however many billions, getting this model out.
Oh yeah.
He's like, okay, we're not totally crazy.
No,
we're spending
totally.
60.
And I think that's why the stock popped and earnings. I mean, earnings were crazy, but I think everyone was very excited about like his positioning on the AI infrastructure investment. And so DeepSeek has cracked the code and unlocked innovation that leading labs have not been able to yet achieve. We expect that any published DeepSeek improvement will be copied by Western labs almost immediately. What are these improvements? We covered a little bit of these these training pre and post. V3 utilizes multi-token prediction at a scale not seen before. These are added attention modules which predict the next few tokens as opposed to a singular token. And so you can imagine, the old version of autocomplete on the iPhone, it would say, would you like to go to, and it would have like breakfast or lunch pop up. But now you see some of these models where it's predicting 3 or 4 words.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, but baked into the model at a very, very low level. So it's just more efficient because it says, oh yeah, after this sentence, usually there's just this, 3 words that go together. And all of those go together. There are added considerations like doing FP8 accuracy and training. We talked about this. Leading labs have been doing FP8 training for some time, so that's a little bit overhyped. There's a lot of things where people just went through the DeepSeek paper and everything that they were doing they assumed was novel. And they were like, "Oh my God, they're using data to train it. Like no one thought of that." And it's like, no, everyone's using data. Everyone's scraping the web. Everyone's like running it on GPUs.
And the synthetic data side as well.
Yeah, and so
I don't know if this is going to come up later in the show, but some lab at Cal was able to generate a reasoning model with $450.
Yeah, I love that.
So anybody working on models out there, we're good for our 450.
Yeah, for 50. So rather than decreasing overall investment, mixture of experts, which is where one large model is comprised of many smaller models that specialize in different things, and this is an emergent behavior. Historically, MOE models have faced struggles about how to determine which token goes to which submodel or expert. DeepSeek implemented a gating network that routed tokens to the right expert in a balanced way that did not detract from model performance. So basically you're getting, instead of activating the entire model, which is very expensive, requires a lot of energy, you're just activating like one little section of the brain. But despite concerns that MOE efficiency gains might reduce investment, Dario over at Anthropic points out that the economic benefits of more capable AI models are so substantial that any cost savings are quickly reinvested into building even larger models. This is Jevons paradox. Yep. Rather than decreasing overall investment, MOE's improved efficiency will accelerate AI scaling efforts. The companies are laser focused on scaling models to more compute and making them more efficient algorithmically. In terms of R1, it benefited immensely from having a robust base model, V3. This is partially because of reinforcement learning. There were 2 focuses here: formatting, ensuring that it provides a coherent output, and helpfulness and harmfulness to ensure the model is useful. As mentioned in the Scaling Laws article, this is what happened with O1. Note that the R1 paper, no compute is mentioned. This is because mentioning how much compute was used would show that they have far more GPUs than their narrative suggests.
And NVIDIA's wouldn't have had billions and hundreds of billions wiped out of its market cap. Yep.
And Dylan also says that additionally, a portion of the data DeepSeek used seems to be data from OpenAI's models, which of course makes it easier because you're just cloning the outputs, and so you're optimizing against a very set benchmark. If you want a GPT-4 model and you're training on all GPT-4 data or a lot of GPT-4 data, you're going to get a lot closer to GPT-4 pretty quickly.
Which again is interesting because they would have had to spend a ton of money with OpenAI, right?
Yep.
Which we've talked about before. The same thing that TikTok did to scale.
Yep.
They just spent billions on user acquisition on Snapchat and Instagram.
Yep.
And it's this weird dilemma that the other platforms get in where they're like, well, we'll take the billions now, and even though we're going to lose out on potentially billions later.
Yep. And so he concludes with a couple different takeaways. DeepSeek's cut rate pricing may be 0 or negative margin, partially to gain market share and investor attention. And then he highlights Jevons paradox again, talking about the AI race is similar to semiconductor fabrication. Cutting edge nodes command premium margins. Everything older quickly commoditizes.
Yep.
And that's like the story of TSMC versus Intel. This dynamic spurs an endless cycle of scaling up new models and hardware investment, benefiting chip providers like NVIDIA. There are export restrictions. H100s are fully banned. They've been replaced by H800s. H800s, I think, were banned, and then the H20 was introduced. More stringent U.S. bans may come. It depends where. We haven't seen exactly how the government will react to this.
It's a really funny dynamic that our government doesn't want NVIDIA selling them great chips.
Yep.
So why is it okay with them selling them any chips at all?
Yep.
And what, assuming that they can.
I mean, the steel man here is that if you're NVIDIA and you're Jensen Huang and you've been building this company that you control and own for 30 years, and for 29 of those years, the government has been telling you, go global. We want you to be as big as possible. Get those tax revenues up, hire people. It's cool. These are our allies. The internet's going to make China a democracy, and they're part of the World Trade Organization. So absolutely go manufacture over there, do business with them. We love this. We'll put you in touch with the ambassador of China.
I totally understand.
And then all of a sudden they rug pull you.
NVIDIA side.
Like, that's kind of harsh.
Yeah.
And so unwinding that relationship.
And
if
NVIDIA had a blanket ban on selling to China or any countries in close enough proximity to China that they can act as a proxy, it would destroy. It would wipe potentially trillions out of the market.
See, I might actually disagree with that, because I think you're right that they wouldn't be as high of a stock, but there's an interesting dynamic where the best time to deleverage from China was when there's insane demand in America. Yeah. And that's what happened during the AI boom in 2023, 2024, where if there was ever a time to say, hey, we're going to pull back in China, it's when Elon Musk and
Sam
Oracle
Altman.
and everyone is sitting down and being like, we will buy every single GPU you can make.
Yeah. So the Altman needs two. He needs 2 million GPUs just in Abilene, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
he'll buy them all.
NVIDIA is going to produce 6 million total this year.
Yep.
Right. So just one guy could potentially be a third of NVIDIA's. And he's not buying those all this year. It's going to be spread out over time. But
I need a steel hat to put on when I'm steel manning, because again, the steel man here of why would Jensen not want to do that? Obviously, people have been like very critical of him not putting America first. But the flip side is, if you do say, okay, I'm only going to sell to these crazy American AI companies, and then there's a bubble and it pops. Yeah. You are more fragile than if you have a more diversified
we're also
revenue
not
base.
It's not like the United States and China have declared war on each
Totally,
other.
yeah.
It's just this great power conflict that kind of moves along slowly, and everybody tries
we're like
to
not
kind of
allies, not enemies.
We're also dependent on so much. I mean,
totally. And so this is an interesting stat. I hadn't heard about this, but the Bank of China announced a 1 trillion yuan, $140 billion US AI subsidy. Let's ring the size gong for China.
The 1T. Hey.
Size is size.
No, size is size.
Size is size.
The size gong isn't nationalistic
size gong
in
rings
any way.
for everyone.
Yeah. And if anything, we hope the ringing sound inspires one of our listeners to invest $1 trillion into something.
Exactly.
Right?
And so 140 billion subsidy, AI subsidy, after meeting DeepSeek's founder. So the guy literally goes and pitches the government.
This all seems very,
you guys should put up 140 billion. And he's like,
conveniently timed, right?
It's their Stargate.
You have Sam Altman gets Trump to do his press tour for him. Less than a week later, China meets with the DeepSeek founder and announces something very similar.
Yep. But interestingly, this is the Bank of China putting up a subsidy of 140 billion. Trump hasn't put up anything for other than just his name and a couple minutes
Vibes.
in the
Sam
PR room.
Sam Aura farmed him.
He aura farmed him, whereas the DeepSeek founder gold farmed him, basically. China has a goal of self-reliance in advanced technologies, obviously, and this aligns with that. And so despite large GPU stocks, scaling to serve millions of new users is tough. Future export controls may starve them of advanced chips. And there's a big question about, was this an aberration? Will they be able to keep up? A lot of that's predicated on, can they either get around the export controls reliably at an order of magnitude larger scale, or can they get SMIC and SME, their version of TSMC and ASML? Can they get those chips up and running and start making competitive GPUs internally? Because if they can do that, it's game over. Like they could make a billion chips, and with something like $140 billion of like
China
demand,
is world class at copying.
Totally. And that's all they have to do.
And I don't even say that in a way to slight them.
No.
But that is historically what they've done.
They're
over
very good
and
at
over
that.
and over and over.
Yeah. And they have ASML machines. They have TSMC machines.
This is what
and they're copying them.
Entrepreneurs, you develop some hardware product or consumer product. You go to China, you see your factory. If you walk to the factory next door, they'd probably be producing your exact item.
Totally.
Almost a 1-for-1
Yep.
within a year if you're actually really selling well.
Yep.
So it's just ruthless. They're good at it. I'm sure they're going to have their own NVIDIA, TSMC.
Yeah.
We'll see
And so
how they do.
let's close with some of these conclusions. Efficiency does not mean reduced investment. This is Jevons paradox. Cost savings from new architectures like mixture of experts spur more scaling, not less. Fast follower. DeepSeek lags top labs but closes gaps swiftly with new paradigm reasoning. Their open source stance accelerates industry-wide progress. Just sick. Frontier capability commands premiums, but DeepSeek's low pricing disrupts incumbents, potentially forcing big labs like OpenAI to innovate even faster. And we're seeing that. There's going to be more pressure. Hey, release O3, get it on the free tier, get an ad product in there, do something to bring this to the masses so you can stem the bleeding of people installing the DeepSeek app. Long-term outlook, hardware demand isn't going away. Quote, more advanced AI, more GPU spending, more scaling. Export controls will likely tighten, but we're going to need to see where this shakes out. I think Jacob Hellberg might be on the team that's working on export controls and tech deals globally.
We actually need a rack of GPUs on the set.
Yep.
I think we should get some H100s.
Yeah.
And just replace that cache with
a couple GPUs.
With a couple GPUs, yeah.
Yeah, great. And so we think the East versus West debate in AI models will continue, and the new paradigm is good for NVIDIA. Very interesting. So fantastic analysis from Dylan Patel. Highly recommend subscribing to Semi-Analysis if you haven't already. It is a great resource, and we love to see deep dives on the timeline.